All right, today we're diving into one of the most important books you've probably never heard of. It's called the Lienü Zhuan, and it's basically a 2,000-year-old instruction manual on how to be a woman. It gives us this incredible peek into a totally different world's ideals, so let's get into it.
So, let me just ask you a question to get us started. What do you think the perfect woman looked like in ancient China 2,000 years ago? Was she a fierce warrior, a brilliant poet, or maybe just a quiet figure in the background? Well, it turns out they had some very, very specific ideas about that.
And those ideas come from this book, the Lienü Zhuan. You can translate it as Biographies of Exemplary Women. It was put together by a scholar named Lu Xiang. But here's the thing, it wasn't just a bunch of stories. Nope, this was a moral textbook, one of the first of its kind, written specifically to teach women how to act, what to value, and what their place in society was.
Now, the way the book is structured is actually pretty brilliant. It starts off by showing you exactly who you should aspire to be. It presents these incredible models of female virtue, basically the ultimate role models.
And you know, there is no bigger star in this whole collection than the mother of Mencius, the famous philosopher. Seriously, if the Lienü Zhuan had a poster child for the perfect mom, it would absolutely be her. Her whole purpose in life, as the story goes, was to make sure her son grew up to be a good and moral person. Her dedication is captured in this legendary story. She literally moved her family 3 times to find the right environment for her son. First, they lived near a cemetery, and little Mencius started playing at holding funerals. So she said nope and moved. Next, they lived by a market, and he started imitating the merchants, haggling. She moved again. Finally, they settled next to a school, and he started imitating the scholars, and she knew, right then, that she'd done her job. The lesson? A mother's most important duty is to shape her child's environment to build their character.
But it wasn't just about moving houses. She taught with these really powerful, dramatic gestures. One time, her son came home from school early, just slacking off. And she didn't yell, she didn't give him a lecture. Instead, she just quietly walked over to her loom, took out a knife, and just sliced right through the fabric, completely destroying all the work she had done.
And then she hit him with this line. Wow. The message couldn't be clearer, right? If you quit halfway through, all your effort was for nothing. It was a lesson he never forgot. And for anyone reading the book, the takeaway was just as powerful. A woman's true worth was in her ability to forge the character of the men in her life.
But, and this is so important, the Lienü Zhuan wasn't just a book of heroes. It had a dark side, a really dark side. For every story of a virtuous empress or a wise mother, there was a scary story about a destructive woman who brought nothing but chaos and ruin. This book taught its lessons just as much through fear as it did through inspiration.
And that brings us to the final, and frankly, the most terrifying chapter of the book. This whole section is a giant flashing warning sign about what not to do, packed with these cautionary tales of women whose bad choices brought down entire kingdoms.
So, let me introduce you to the ultimate villain of the Lienü Zhuan, a woman named Mo Shi. She was the favorite concubine of the last king of the Shah, which was China's very first dynasty. And in this book, she's not just a bad person. She's practically the living embodiment of dynastic collapse.
I mean, just listen to this stuff. Her story is just one shocking detail after another. She had a pool built and filled it with wine, a pool so big you could sail boats on it. Then she forced 3,000 men to drink from it like animals, and she laughed as they got drunk and drowned. She was the ultimate enabler, just feeding the king's ego and his worst impulses.
So here's the real kicker. The book draws a direct, straight line from her personal corruption to a massive national disaster. Her terrible influence, it says, is what led to the king being overthrown and the entire Shah dynasty coming to an end. The moral for anyone reading this was terrifyingly clear. Your private actions can have the biggest public consequences imaginable.
Now, I know these stories might sound like they're from a different planet, but their influence was huge, and it lasted for a very, very long time. This wasn't just some old book that collected dust on a shelf. It was a cultural force.
For more than 2,000 years, the ideas in this book shaped Chinese culture and then spread even further. Just think about that. That's a legacy longer than most empires or even religions have been around. It's incredible.
So why does all this matter? Well, because for centuries, this was the book used to educate women. It created these really powerful archetypes, the selfless, perfect mother on one side and the destructive, seductive woman on the other. And those ideas got lodged deep in the cultural imagination. The stories were simple, they were memorable, and their lessons shaped how society saw women and how women were taught to see themselves for generation after generation.
Which kind of leaves us with one last big thought. We've got these two extreme opposing ideas of what a woman can be: the quiet, nurturing teacher who builds men up, and the chaotic force of nature who tears kingdoms down. Are those ideas really just ancient history? Or can we still see the echoes of these 2,000-year-old archetypes in our world right now? Something to think about.